the PowerPoint slides and the template that I outlined in the syllabus, that's really the only way I can grade. I can't sit there with a grade book while you're giving your actual presentation and say you're moving too much or your eye contact isn't good. I only grade based on the PowerPoint and whether or not you met that criteria. So if we don't get to you, don't worry, it won't affect your grade. If you really want to present, we can find a time to do it either at the end of another class or before or after class in later weeks. One thing I want to mention as we finish up, I know it's tempting to look at the cell phone and get restless, but please stay engaged. Do not look at your cell phone for the rest of the class and try to concentrate on what you can learn from watching your fellow presenters.
Because this topic's really, really important. And you want to live up to 75. Hi guys, my name is Renu Varghese. Today I'm going to be talking about how to prevent heart disease by living a very, very healthy lifestyle. What I want to do with this presentation is I just want to share a bit of a knowledge because some of the most important things to me out of this great life is my family. And even before I was born, my grandfather had passed away, and he's been known to be a really amazing person, and I never got the chance to meet him. And ever since learning about, well, at least coming to the age of really understanding what all of this heart disease and stuff is, it was around middle school where it really piqued my interest, and I really want to share this topic with you guys. So moving forward, I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction as to what heart disease even is. Did you know that heart disease is actually the #1 cause of death in the United States? I believe second is cancer or stroke, but #1 is heart disease. I understand that it's a very, very broad topic, but I want to talk about the major risk factors that's involved in heart disease, which are high blood pressure, smoking, and high cholesterol. So we'll go into the details of that up in the next upcoming slides. And like I said before, my purpose in wanting to share this information with you is so that you can learn something from this and make lifestyle changes however you see it fit, so you can live up to 75 or older and become some marathon track star. So just want to give you a little bit of an overview as to what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to be explaining the risk factors that's associated with heart disease, how to reduce your risk for developing heart disease, and then we'll go over a graph of what percent you can reduce that risk by making these lifestyle adjustments, some takeaway key messages, and if there's time, we'll go for some questions. So first, we're going to be talking about high blood pressure. So as you can see on this picture, this is pretty much an artery, probably it's a vessel. So here's what a normal vessel would look like. Right about here, that's where you get hypertensive. So just want to explain that. In layman terms, it pretty much means that whenever there's plaque buildup inside your vessels, it causes a lot of pressure. So when taking your blood pressure, there's two values. There's a diastolic and a systolic pressure. The systolic pressure is pretty much the amount of pressure that's inside your artery as your heart is contracting. And diastolic is the amount of pressure that's inside your heart as it's relaxing. And then on the right side, that picture just gives you a range as to what's considered normal and what's not. Just want to explain a little bit more about high blood pressure. High blood pressure is also known as hypertension. So it's pretty much where plaque builds up, which increases blood pressure. The determining factors of blood pressure is pretty much the interaction of diet, exercise, and metabolism. So a healthy diet would be very, very low sodium and low saturated fat. So get rid of all junk food. Don't put salt in your food. And you want to up the potassium, calcium, and magnesium intake. In a lot of patients that I come across, the doctors actually say salt is poison. So stay far away from it, especially if you have hypertension. So they prescribed supplements of potassium, calcium, and magnesium to help with that. Second thing is smoking. So smoking, I don't have to say, I mean, needless to say more, right? It's just very, very bad for you. So this is pretty much what happens when you smoke. What happens inside your arteries. There are these things called, let me just move on to the next slide. Just so I show you. So there's something called an LDL, which is a bad cholesterol. And as you eat saturated fatty foods, that LDL tends to shift upward, which causes all of this plaque formation. And there's something called LDL oxidation, where it interacts with oxygen and it actually solidifies and it gets stuck onto your artery walls. And that smoking plus LDL oxidation, well, equals pretty much death. So, sorry. So the third thing I wanted to focus on was high cholesterol. So what is cholesterol, right? Cholesterol is pretty much a soft, waxy substance found in the bloodstream that helps to form cell membranes. And the way that cholesterol is transported, there are two types of fatty proteins that it's carried on. One is called HDL, which stands for high-density lipoprotein, and the other is LDL, which is low-density lipoprotein. So pretty much HDL carries cholesterol away from the bloodstream, whereas LDL carries it towards the bloodstream, which explains why there's so much plaque formation with increased amounts of LDL. So increased amount of LDL leads to plaque, which leads to coronary artery disease and a bunch of other heart diseases. So the easiest way to prevent all of these risk factors are to avoid tobacco, be very active, get at least 30 minutes of cardio, and choose healthy foods. And I just thought that that picture was way too cute to not put up there. So this graph, I just wanted to, it pretty much shows the risk reduction when it comes to lifestyle changes. So the x-axis are the risk factors, the high blood pressure, the smoking, and the high cholesterol. The y-axis pretty much just shows the risk reduction percentage. The red indicates where they're at now if you are at risk for heart disease. And with the lifestyle changes, that's the percent that you lower your risk by. So 60% decrease if you make lifestyle changes for blood pressure, about 50% decrease for if you stop smoking, and 30% decrease for changes that you make with cholesterol. Some of my key takeaways are avoiding these risk factors by making all these lifestyle changes may increase your lifespan. Eat very healthy and nutritious food. Do cardio for at least 30 to 45 minutes a day, like I said before, and avoid smoking. If you guys have any questions, I will take them now.
Excellent, fantastic. Comments for Runen? Okay.
Very lively. I really enjoyed it right from the start. Good transition. Professor was saying something, then you kind of brought us right into it. And then you also did allude to some of the other topics that were mentioned today. So it helps jog our memory, helps tie things together. Just a few comments on improvement. I think one of your earlier slides had 2 or 3 graphics that were just really bright. I couldn't see from here what the text in the box said.
Wait, was that the 3 risk factors?
Yeah, it was the 3 boxes along the bottom.
It was the tracker. Okay. So
Oh, you couldn't see it?
So she used the tracker. Thank you, great job. But her color selection was not ideal because it's a little. It was a
lot clearer on my screen on my laptop. Yeah, right.
It's like which ones is supposed to be? Which ones are the ones you're talking about? If we look at it, it's obvious. We realize, but it's almost like the brighter ones are the ones that instantly draw more attention to it.
Yeah, but you make a good point, because a lot of times we make presentations and we've never been to the environment that we're presenting, and all of a sudden the layout of the screen or the land is totally different.
Yes. Key point. So the way it looked on our laptop was different from the way it looked in this environment. Great point. Lee?
I really enjoy your presentation. I like your relaxed and enjoyable body language. Couple of comments. One is that you use a figure to show something, but the font in the figure, whatever legend or
It wasn't big.
very small.
Oh, do you want to scroll back to that?
To see that. Yeah. Yeah, this one. But another one is that maybe I missed that part. I don't hear very clearly about relationship between smoking and heart disease.
Oh, yeah, so that's a part about, so smoking oxidizes the LDL levels in your arteries, which causes calcification.
Okay.
And then, yeah, it just causes a lot of plaque formation in your artery, which leads to coronary artery disease.
Okay.
Great, great. Other comments, Saeed?
Yeah, I thought it was good that, I think the topic was a good topic. I would have liked to know more about like, what are all, because like you said at the beginning, you made it clear, like this is a very general
Yeah.
problem, like heart disease. So to know all the specifics of heart disease and like, for example, smoking, what does it actually cause? Like what would you be diagnosed with in relation to heart disease?
Yeah.
Another thing I think that hurt you were the notes.
Yeah.
I know there was a lot of technical information, and
Yeah.
it's balancing between looking at the slides or having something with you. And I think maybe if you had it on the slides and not looked,
Right.
it would have been better. It kind of was distracting me.
Yeah.
And I think it
was
messed up your
distracting me,
momentum.
so it was like,
Yeah.
oh, shut it.
Because you started really energetic and like you just knew everything off the top of your head, and then you kind of lost the authority because like you were reading off of the paper.
Yeah.
I like the way you say that. You've lost your authority because
Right.
you're reading off paper.
I do.
So it wasn't terrible, but in general, we don't want to listen to people who are reading to us because they're saying that what's on the paper is the important thing. When we want to talk to someone who is so passionate and so intimately aware of all the things in their industry that they can tell us. And I think there was a lot of information that could have been condensed or cut out of this presentation. So maybe all the little details that you were worried about remembering weren't necessarily as important as you thought. Like the LDL and the whatever,
Yeah.
you just explained that again, and I thought like, oh, I kind of get it now this time. But it could have been something you could have just said. Basically, it means this. Okay? So let's move on. Vishal.
It was so much technical information, so I like that you had pictures, and that really helped.
Okay.
Fantastic. I saw a bunch of hands, like half the class wants to say.
I like how you made it personal at the beginning, talking about your family, to draw it in.
Oh, yeah.
This graph was a little confusing to me. A couple things were I guess the y-axis is a percentage, but it goes beyond 100.
Ah.
That was confusing me. And then
Oh, I didn't know how to fix it.
calling it risk reduction, but I think it's just, you're showing the risk, and then I didn't understand the reduction part until the last click when those things popped up.
Yeah, just like we talked about with Marilyn's graph. We want to look at the graph and have it, oh, that makes sense to us now. We don't want little things like that to confuse us. Good point. Other comments?
If I recall correctly, the overview was the second or third slide. Now, I thought it was slightly misplaced.
Overview is too late.
Yeah, too late. I think there
It
was
was like
another
my
slide
third
before the
slide.
overview.
Yeah, I felt like you said the overview twice.
Oh, did I?
I don't know, that's how I
I
felt.
think it's the purpose.
Overview. Well, she had I could go either way on that. So she had an introduction that drew us in, and then she gave us the overview. But still, we can look at that comment, that maybe some people prefer the overview right at the beginning. That's a fair comment. There's no 100% right or wrong answer. All right, great. Who you got? All right, fantastic.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Mesia, and I'm going to talk about Groupon. It's Groupon a right marketing tool for your business. So probably some of you have used Groupon before, I'm sure. So I'm going to go first with the introduction, then history of the company, then some competitors, then there was a research made by Rice University, and 5 pros and 5 cons, and then the conclusion. So what is Groupon? It's a daily deal website, and you can find promotions or discounts for restaurants, spas, theaters, and much more. What is more appealing to get a massage for that is worth $100, and then you pay 25, or let's say grabbing a meal value at 50 and pay only 15. So this is kind of thing how Groupon works. The history of the company, it was launched in 2008 in Chicago. It's a fastest growing company in the decade. The points Taylor built Groupon, which is points kind of failed with this concept, so they give the opportunity to Groupon to stood up. Expanded aggressively over 48 countries and 500 markets, over 45 million active customers, 46% alone in North America. In this graph, I picked those years because as Groupon revenues in 2008 and 2011, you can see how between 2009 and 2010 the revenues just goes up exponentially. Then here is some competitors. Living Social is kind of the same idea. Buy with me and Guild. Then the group of revenue by category. So in this pie, I listed from top to bottom. As you can see, number 1 is health beauty, number 2 services, number 3 food and drinks. So now, who's not loving the Groupon and why? So first, a study by Rice University. I'm going to explain that in the next slide. Understand the main idea of running a promotion. So basically, the problem is that business often goes to a deal, and they don't understand. Well, they don't have clearly understanding what they want to accomplish. So, and they don't prepare the stuff really well. So when they get this big wave of customers, then they just it happens this graphic right here. So I know it's a lot of information, but basically the school surveyed 150 business, small to mid-size size, and they finding revealed that 66% of the merchants say that they were profitable, and 32% say they were not. So you see that the sequence, there's another pie. More than 40% of the customers say that they will not run another Groupon promotion again. What I also found is the restaurants, they were the more affected because of the margin. Groupon takes 50% of the revenue for each deal. So this is what happens when you don't train your staff very well. So you have long lines, the demand exceeds the supply of the merchant. So they basically ended up going to somebody else and find another merchant. The learning curve is structure a deal, so basically they're trying to understand how this works. So this marketing tool, well, you need to budget for this in the marketing plan. Some of these social network tools are free, so you can save money. So you start on Twitter, then you like it on Facebook, advertising on Groupon, Google, and then offering Groupon, and then you get your feedback from Yelp. So now I'm going to talk about 5 pros. So number 1, attracts a lot of consumers. So you're going to get a lot of customers, and also the customers that don't want to pay more than they have in the budget. It advertises your business, because you're going to have exposure. So people is going to probably get more familiar with the good of services. And this is your opportunity to spotlight. And then, so you're going to make sure they're going to like your products, and then going to come back and buy from you again. It helps to move inventory. It helps to move your slow items in your inventory. It builds relationships. That means you have the opportunity to create a strong relationship with new customers, not only the one-time buys. It generates incremental revenue. So what it means is, if you have a low cost or a fixed cost structure, you can make money with a promotion. So let's say you have a rock climbing business, so he has already the equipment and the facility. So running a promotion can help you to get some extra cash by getting more bodies into the facility. So let's say people pay $10 for a service of 20. The owner is gonna make $5 for each voucher. When 5 comes, well, deals attract low-end bargain seekers, right? So you're just gonna get bargaining shoppers. They don't want to spend more money than the coupon. Deals hurt the brand. Yeah, the obsession for the price don't help the brand loyalty or the brand awareness. Since when you have customer paying a low price, in the future they don't want to pay the full price for the good of service. Deals are not profitable. Yeah, like I said, Groupon takes 50% of the revenue, so you have to do the math. Work very well with your gross margin. Deals don't generate repeat customer. Like I said, you probably may not see the person again if they don't have the voucher on hand. Marketing experts say that only 19% come back to your business. And then Groupon doesn't make your business memorable. From my personal experience, when I use Groupon, I only remember the great deal that I got. I don't remember so much about the business or the good of service. So that really hurts. Some recommendation for your business. Advise the business on how to best structure and operate a deal. Cap size, number of employees, upsell, follow up, collect data about customers, offer each customer the most relevant deals, loyalty programs, and improve customer service to the end customer. And then conclusion, so it gives you the opportunity to create new clients, new customers, like I said, give you the flavor, spotlight your business. And well, then after that you can sell whatever you take at a full price. And the other conclusion, however, at the same time, we don't want our existing loyal customer running in using Groupon because you're gonna lose money in every single transaction.
Excellent. Thank you, Jose. Comments for Jose? Lavanya?
I would prefer an introduction slide. Said about it, but wasn't laid out.
Okay.
That was one. And the second thing was when I was looking at the graph that he had with the year and the sale, the last one alone was red in color. So I was kind of distracted trying to figure out why was it red? Why was it any different from the other 3 years? It was still the same.
Okay.
It was the first quarter of 2000.
Do you want to scroll back to that slide,
Sure.
Jose? How do we like the slide transitions while he's getting back to that?
I liked it actually.
You liked it?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone think it was too much, too distracting? All right, so, okay, so here, wait, look, Jose, look at this for a minute. All right, wait, Jose, look at us for a minute. Raise your hand if you think the slide transition was too distracting. Okay, raise your hand if you liked it. So this is data. This is information. Some people thought just the waving thing was a little bit too much, maybe not appropriate for Groupon. Other people are like, oh, it engages me. So there's no right or wrong answer. We got to think about the fact that half of our audience said they didn't like it. That's important. And we got to think about, is it useful? Does it build on what we're trying to create? Al?
Just a point on that, I thought it was very eye-catching in the beginning, and then maybe throughout, it didn't have to be as dramatic, but yeah, definitely at the beginning, I heard a couple loud. It was cool.
Yeah. All right, we're going to this graph. Yes.
The graph that she mentioned is, oh, I passed it.
Oh, why is that one
What's
red?
different with the red?
Groupon revenues.
It's quarterly, not
Quarter
annual.
one.
Yeah, it's only one quarter, that's right, that's what I.
Is it
This is not
scaled?
the whole year.
Is that like, is it scaled? Is it like they made a lot more money in?
Yeah,
Just in
now in
Q1.
2016 it's only almost nine. Yeah.
One quarter they made as much as 2010? Okay. Right, this is interesting stuff, but it does bring me to a comment that I had about the whole presentation, was what is the point of the presentation? Is it to tell us the pros and cons of us as investing in Groupon for our business, or is it to give us an overview of the financial performance and the competitive landscape of Groupon? And I think you fell into the trap of giving us too much. Sometimes you're talking about the competitive landscape, sometimes you're saying how it relates to us. Jameson.
Yeah, the one thing I thought I would have liked to see you spend more time on was the recommendations. I thought you had some really good recommendations, you just kind of read them off as a list. But, you know, if we're gonna advertise on Groupon, or, you know, advertise in general on social media, some of the things you listed there, I would have liked to see explained and fleshed out some more.
Yeah, there is so much here. This is like a half-day seminar on Groupon. Really, it's like the first hour is a background and presentation on Groupon, and he could have used just the information he had. And then the second is breakout sessions, people who want to talk about how to train your staff when you use Groupon, and whether or not you should actually use Groupon. So there's so much information here, and I think he tried to give us too much now.
Also, just on the conclusion slide too, it seems like, I know the original topic was supposed to be, is Groupon the right tool for your business? It seemed a little bit geared toward, a lot of the slides were just, no, it's not. And then the conclusion at the end, one of the key points that you made was that you will eventually lose money if you use Groupon, but I didn't see how that tied into, I guess, from what I thought you were leading to what you actually led to, it just seemed like a
Good point. Say,
I think maybe took for granted that maybe people know what Groupon is already. It would have been nice to have an overview of the business model, so that you have no idea what Groupon is and how the business model works. Just like a chart of maybe showing that.
yeah, you know, I like that. So an overview of Groupon business model, but I would not add that to everything else. I'd say that's all he needed. An overview of Groupon, and then he could have eliminated maybe a third of the business competitive landscape type stuff and gone straight to, is it right for you? John.
I would have liked him to look at us more. I thought this
Yeah, okay.
slides a lot.
So Jose spent a lot of time in this position talking like this. All right, so we want him to look at us because that engages us. Another thing in terms of this presentation, when you look people in the eye and talk to them the whole time, it forces you to think about what you're saying. And I think he would have realized that he was talking about things that were not as relevant to us as we're deciding whether or not we want Groupon. He's talking about a lot of things that we don't need. So eye contact not only engages our audience, but reminds us to keep it relevant and important.
A note on that, I noticed that because he was talking towards the corner, voice was echoing. So even without, if I wasn't looking at you, I still would have known that you were talking at the back wall instead of talking at me because the quality of your voice changed.
Ah,
That is just
interesting.
an observation.
So this detracting echo. And I remember at one point when Jose was talking like this, Lavanya turned and looked at me. You're just what?
I was just distracted.
You're distracted by
That's why I thought when
by
if you
his
could
turn?
look at me more, then I'd be forced to listen to you.
Yeah, so there was this inside joke between audience members because you weren't engaging us. It's like, what's going on? You're sort of distancing yourself by not making eye contact. And that is so easily correctable by just looking at your audience.
But it's so hard.
We'll do some exercises next week to practice good eye contact.
Because when I was doing my presentation, like, looking at you guys, I was like constantly thinking about, oh my God, what are they thinking about?
Oh.
Am I doing this really?
They're not thinking about how they want to judge you. They're thinking about what you're going to tell them that is valuable. True thinking.
Hi everyone, my name is Ruby, so I'll be talking about texting and driving. So I know, as probably most of you, if not all of you, are aware that texting while driving is distracting, not to mention dangerous. So My goal for this presentation is not to scare you, but to hopefully convince you to not engage in this behavior. So I'll start off with 3 kinds of distracted driving. So there's the visual distraction. So that pretty much means the driver is not, the eyes of the driver are not on the road. They're distracted, they're focused somewhere else, or looking elsewhere. That's visual distraction. There's manual distraction. So that pretty much means the driver's hands are not on the wheel. So whether they're grabbing something or reaching for a device or holding a device perhaps. So that's a manual distraction. And there's cognitive distraction, meaning to say the driver's mind is not on the road. They're not focused, they're thinking about something else, probably thinking about what to type, what to reply, or thinking about their text message that they just received. So text messaging, speaking of that, involves all 3, consists of all 3. There's the visual distraction, because you're not looking at the road, you're reading the text, you're thinking of what to type, you're typing. And there's manual distraction as well, because now both hands are not on the wheel. At least one hand is not on the wheel because you're holding your cell phone, you're trying to type, and also navigate your phone at the same time. And there's the cognitive distraction as well, because clearly you're not thinking about the road, you're thinking about the text message and what to reply. So as I was researching, some of the sources mentioned that it takes, at a minimum, 5 seconds to respond or answer to a text. So if you think about that, if you're going, let's say, at a speed of 55 miles per hour, that's as if you're driving the length of a football field like as if you're blindfolded. So what I want to tell you here is a lot can happen in those 5 seconds. A lot can happen in the length of the football yard that you just traveled in those 5 seconds. So it is very dangerous, and it's as if you're really driving blindfolded. So I want to share some facts and statistics with you. So cell phone use alone, annually, attributes to about 1.6 million crashes per year. Just cell phone use. Texting, particularly, is attributed to 330,000 injuries per year, just texting alone specifically. And another interesting statistic I've found is texting increases your crash risk 23-fold. You're 23 times more likely to get into an accident if you're texting. So let's take a look at this graph. So this graph displays the increase of risk that you have in causing an accident depending on the type of activity you're engaged. So on the bottom, the numbers represent the increase in risk. And on the left axis, as you can see on the y-axis, those are the activities you can possibly engage while driving. So as you can see, compared to talking or listening or dialing a phone or even reaching for a device, texting clearly is much more dangerous because it increases significantly your risk of causing an accident. So another interesting statistic actually that surprised me is if you're driving while texting, you're 6 times more likely to cause an accident than when you're driving while drunk. So think about that moment, consider that. So that tells you how much of a distraction texting is, how impaired you are when you're texting. That it's worse than basically driving drunk, so think about that. So not only does texting cause car crashes, it also can cause fatalities. So those statistics over there are from the year 2013. Those were the most recent statistics I found. I'm going to actually turn and talk about the statistics because I have not memorized the numbers. I'm sorry. In the entire year of 2013, there were approximately 30,000 fatal crashes, that resulted in approximately 33,000 deaths. So out of those 30 fatal crashes, approximately 3,000 of them were due to distracted driving, causing 3,154 fatalities. And of those 3,000, which is approximately 10% of the 30,000 total crashes, of those 3,000 fatal crashes, 411 of them were due to cell phone use. causing 445 deaths that year. So as if the statistics I just showed you and risk of dying wasn't deterrent enough, maybe this will be. It's actually illegal to text while driving. So it's against the law. There is no federal ban banning texting while driving. However, several states have imposed their own laws banning texting. So Washington is the first state that enacted laws back in 2007 banning all texting in the state. Several states followed suit. So as of June 2016, as you can see on the map, 46 out of the 50 states have enacted laws that ban all texting. Out of the 4 that remain, Texas and Missouri, have imposed partial bans in the sense that they impose bans on motorists who are 21 or under from texting and driving, and also school bus drivers. But looking at the trend, I'm sure those 4 states will soon enact laws that prevent all, ban all texting for all motorists. So for New Jersey particularly, there are penalties if you're caught texting and driving. If you're a first-time offender, there is a fine, a significant steep fine, $200 to $400. If you're caught a second time, the fine increases $400 to $600. A third offense further increase $600 to $800, but at the same time, you'll also get 3 points added to your record, and you may or may not have your license suspended. So you might be wondering, knowing all this, knowing the fact it's against the law, it's so dangerous, you probably think that many people don't engage in texting and driving. Not true, unfortunately. So AT&T had conducted a survey back in 2014. So they surveyed drivers who own cell phones. They surveyed approximately 1,000 drivers, and out of those drivers, that chart represents all the drivers who were surveyed and who own cell phones. Of those drivers, you can see 98% have responded that they're aware of the dangers of texting and the fact that it was against the law, which is a good thing. So that means many of the drivers know the dangers of texting. However, if you look at the next graph, that graph, out of the drivers who admitted that they know the dangers of the texting, so the 98%, out of that 98%, even though they said they were aware of the dangers of texting, 3/4 of them texted anyway. So it is pretty prevalent, and just merely knowing that it's dangerous and the fact that it's illegal, it's not deterrent enough. You might be wondering why were they engaged in driving while texting. So some of the reasons they provided in the survey, one was they felt they were missing something important. So they felt the constant need of checking their cell phones because they thought they were missing out on something. Another reason that was commonly reported is they thought that their driving performance was not affected by their texting, which is not true, because I just told you all the statistics as to why it's not true. It's very dangerous. Some also reported that there's an expectation to respond to text right away. So that was some of their reasons. Another last reason, actually, was they experienced feelings of anxiousness. And approximately 6% of them actually even reported that they were addicted to texting. So they felt the need, the compulsion to respond to text. So they felt that anxiousness. So as you heard and saw through this presentation, that texting is prevalent and it's dangerous. But also I want you to keep in mind that no reason, especially not these reasons, are worth it. So as AT&T puts it, no text is worth a life. So what I want you to take out of this presentation is when you're leaving tonight or when you're driving some other time, please keep your phones down, put your phones down if you don't do that already. Turn it off even, and don't drive while you text. Thank you.
the pie graph?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unaware, I think,
Yeah.
unaware.
Unaware, I'm so sorry, yeah. The black, I suppose, is unaware.
But the overall presentation was really good. I liked it, how you presented. It had all the data, which was really good and interesting.
Fantastic. Evan?
Yeah, I thought you did a good job doing the having all of your information lead to an inescapable conclusion. I think you've done a lot of science stuff.
Yeah, I like the graphics. They were very clear, and your message was to the point. It was very helpful.
Maybe I'm the outlier. The one thing I took out of it is that if you get in a wreck when you're texting, you're more likely to get in a wreck. But it's less likely to be fatal. There's like 400 fatalities out of 30-some thousand.
Right, yeah, correct. You know, not all fatal crashes, you know, yes, I agree that texting might not, you know, cause that many deaths, but if you wanted to. Is there no question?
Sensitivity, and this figure doesn't support your point.
Say that again, I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you.
I agree with you, Christine, that this figure doesn't support your point.
Doesn't support, okay. Probably less scary and less impactful. Those are other statistics, though I can't make more people die to convince you guys, I suppose.
Yeah, I would agree with Lee's point that this is interesting stuff and it's important, but it didn't lead directly to the point that you're making. And to exacerbate that, you said, so it's so obvious that, you know, yada yada, and then you continued, which we believe because everyone thinks, all right, texting is bad and dying is bad and any fatalities are bad. So we were with you, you didn't lose us, but it didn't have the same impact that it was that clear, logical conclusion, Jim.
So to Leigh's point, I think the way you could have made this really like work for you is eliminate the outer bubble and basically say that like, you know, whatever, what is that, 2,900? So it would be like, I don't know, 1 out of every 6 distracted driving deaths is a result of texting. And you could say like over 1 person per day, like 1.3 people per day or whatever die as a result of texting and driving. And that like really hits home because you think like every day someone's dying because of this. Because statistically, 445 people dying out of the number of people driving every day, I hate to sound heartless, but it's kind of insignificant, right? Compared to like the people who die from other things. So just something to kind of consider, you know, to make it work for you.
Yeah, really good points. And this is exactly the conversation we want to have about what sort of data is going to help you in a technical presentation. Renee?
I loved your presentation. I thought it was awesome. The only thing was this slide, I was so distracted by how gory that picture was. And maybe it was just alluding to the fatality concept of it, but I was like, holy God, like that's
Hoping it would add to the shock value, but I didn't mean to scare you, I'm so sorry.
No, I see what it is.
That was not the goal of the presentation, sorry.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you, Shruti. Okay, so we're just going to keep going in order, but if you don't want to present, we can just skip you. That's totally fine. Jim?
Sure. This was stressful. I want to at least, you know.
Yes, you want to present?
I want to present now.
Let's do it.
All right.
So my name is Jim, and I want to do a presentation for you guys on reusable rocket technology. And I'm going to tell you how it's revolutionizing access to space, redefining the economics of space, and I also want you to leave here understanding why this is significant. So how many of you have seen Elon Musk's in the headlines? You've seen him reland a rocket, right? It's pretty cool. But other than the fact that it's kind of cool, like, does anybody really understand why that's significant for us? One, cool, we're doing well. Two, good. So, in short, SpaceX's reusable rocket technology will revolutionize our access to space. Now, I point out SpaceX here only because they're the only player in the game right now that has successfully demonstrated their ability to actually recover the vehicle. There's others trying, they're the ones who have done it, but I don't think it will be long before you have somebody else. So, needless to say, there's a lot of benefits to spaceflight, right? Scientific knowledge. Recently, there was a study done on bone density in space, and it actually by doing that study in microgravity, they were able to validate a new potential treatment for osteoporosis, which is kind of interesting. Now, I'm not a doctor, I can't get too detailed there, but there's a lot of really cool medical advancements. Innovative materials. If you guys have ever been up to the upper floors, you'll see that funny crusty coating on all the beams. That's actually a fire protection coating to maintain the integrity of the building. That thermal shield, the material was actually developed from the thermal heat shielding of the Apollo missions. Now, chemistry is advanced, but it's kind of a grandchild, whatever you want to call it, of those original technologies. Economic activity. Thousands of people are employed directly by the people who launch rockets, both recoverable and non-recoverable. But then there's probably tens, hundreds, maybe millions of people who work for firms that are also affected by those businesses. So subcontractors, material suppliers, accounting firms, auditors, whatever you can think of, someone's affected by it. And of course, the human experience, right? Like, we're putting people into space. It's kind of weird. You start to realize like how small we really are. I'm not a psychologist, but there's definitely some cool things going on there. So the current model, who's using this? It's going to be people like your ULA, NASA, let's see if I can do this by memory, Orbital, Astrium. What is it, right? And SpaceX for now. So you've got high vehicle costs, which means you have a high launch cost, right? The rocket costs a lot of money, so it's going to cost the satellite provider, your DirecTVs, your Iridium for your satellite phone, when you're on that cruise ship, it's going to cost them a lot of money to put the satellite up, which means you're pushing people out of the game. A lot of smaller firms can't afford it. So what happens? You have fewer rockets now, you're keeping the cost up, and it's this vicious circle. The key to affordable spaceflight is breaking that cycle. So what does the future model look like? Well, the one SpaceX is pursuing is something along the lines of this. A reduced vehicle cost because you're building an aggressively priced vehicle. You have lower launch cost because you're reusing part of that vehicle with the intention that you're going to drive cost out of the parts that can't be recovered and then focus your efforts and your money on the parts that can be recovered and reused. So with a lower launch cost, you're going to get increased activity in space, more players in the game, which means now you're going to be ordering more vehicles, taking advantage of the better economies of scale, driving the cost down further, and you get into a much better cycle. So just a little bit of history here, some fun facts before I go on. Elon Musk, if you know anything about him, he doesn't really do press releases. He actually does Twitter. So a lot of my statistics came from his official Twitter feed because he doesn't release memos. Everything's off the cuff, like he's just on his plane, he's just throwing things out there a lot of time. And it's kind of, that's why there's like a cult of personality around him. So you can't really go on the SpaceX website and verify this. I recommend him checking his verified Twitter account and you'll find all this information. So the estimates are that the US government pays about, they're going to pay about $90 million for a Falcon rocket. Now, in the commercial marketplace, it's a lot lower. It's about 60. That's because the government has extra demands for the things they want in the rocket, et cetera, et cetera. Think of them like options in your car. The government's going for now. Elon's publicly stated that the first stage is somewhere between 50 and 75% of the cost. Now, if you don't know what the first stage is, I'm going to get to that in a minute, right? We're going to make a really conservative estimate that for every $1 million of that first stage they're saving, it's costing them another $500,000 to actually refurbish it and put it back into service. So in the end, he says they expect to save about 30% on the cost of a launch. So if that's a $90 million launch, it should take it down to 60. If it's a $60 million commercial launch, it should take you down to about 40. So let's look here, right? This is a brief chart that I put together. This is not comprehensive. This is pretty much the most popular rockets that are used in the spaceflight industry in the US right now. The average marginal cost of the shuttle launch was $450 million. And that's not the average of the program cost. That's how much it costs to refurbish it, refuel it, and put it back up. That's crazy. Now granted, has a very big payload. That LEO payload is low Earth orbit. That's the orbit most satellites operate in. There's tons of different orbits. They don't matter. For this presentation, we're going to focus on the one that everyone's using, the satellites, the weather, communications, things like that. And what you have is a figure called low Earth orbit dollars cost. It's cost per pound, which is basically like if you're going to maximize the capacity of that vehicle, this is how much you're paying for every pound of cargo you want to put into orbit. That's a pretty wild number there, $7,000 per pound. The ULA Delta IV is $8,400. Now that's a big government rocket. That's the government price I'm using for that. you can see as you move down, if SpaceX Falcon 9 in the non-reusable condition will cost you about $61 million, a refurbished rocket should be about $40 million. So, I don't know if you guys can see this right here. That's a pretty wild figure, $1,700 per pound into orbit versus $8,400 on the high side. What I want to look here is, this is just a graph of that to kind of put it into perspective for you and how much cheaper it is per pound to put a refurbishable Falcon 9 rocket into space. And I'd imagine that most other people are going to realize savings compared to, say, the shuttle or ULA Delta IV. Here is the cost of putting a 19,000-pound satellite in space. That 19,000-pound number is the maximum capacity of the smallest rocket here. So as a baseline, if you're Iridium or you're DirecTV and you say, you know what, I need a satellite, this is how much you're going to pay to put that satellite into space. And so the difference here between here and here, or even here and here, is about $100 million. If the average satellite's 300, for every 3 launches, you basically get a free satellite. I mean, that's crazy to think about things in those terms. So before I go on, you got an idea of the cost savings, right? It's pretty cool, saving a lot of money here. But I want to make sure that you guys all understand what exactly they're doing when we say it's reusable and recovering the first stage. So the traditional launch, you got a rocket down here, it launches. As it moves up, it breaks into pieces, right? In the back end of the rocket, there's big engines and there's tanks. As it moves up, you essentially think of it as running out of gas. So as the rockets want to propel, forward into its space flight, they want to get rid of all that dead weight. It's not helping them anymore. So what they do is they actually separate the stages of the rockets, and it currently crashes back down to Earth. And then on some rockets, there's a second, third, even fourth stages, depending on what types of rockets you're launching. And it's the same process. So as it's expended, it falls back down to Earth. If you remember that first stage I was talking about, that 50 to 75% of the cost of the rocket is just getting jettisoned and crashing back down to Earth. So this is where SpaceX comes in. They said, all right, okay, we're going to launch. We're going to separate the stages here. The second stage and the satellite's going to go into orbit. We'll lose the fairings. We might lose some of the second stage propulsion. But the real cost savings is this right here. They invert the rocket, and then it propels itself down onto a barge, and that's that cool video you guys saw on the news. So it lands on this, they call it a drone ship. It's really a barge. And they tow it back in. So it's pretty cool because it comes back in, it launches, it's got these legs on it right here. They pop out in flight and it just lowers itself down. So they recovered 2 of them so far successfully. This is a photo of one, again, from Elon's Twitter. What are you going to do? He claims it's ready to go. They haven't tested them yet, but they have a lot of customers lined up to reuse these, and their business model moving forward is very dependent on this reusable rocket. It's going to change the way we get to space. So I explained a couple things here so far, and before I move on, I want to just reiterate those. Cost savings. Huge cost saving by doing a reusable rocket. The significance of access to space. I think you guys really understand why it's important we as humans do it. The final conclusion. Where are we going with this? The last point I want to make is why this is important to all of us. So what will we achieve next? And the truth is, I don't know. None of you actually know, and that's the most exciting thing about this. SpaceX has 38 launches, and 31 of them are non-military. They're for commercial purposes. They're for different countries, weather satellites, communication, deep space exploration, radio telescopes to find new stars and galaxies and things like that. I mean, that's pretty wild. As you move down this list, it's some really impressive things that we're doing. And when you start thinking about the potential of understanding weather systems, better communication in third world countries, deep space, finding out what else is out in our galaxy and beyond, resupplying the space station. If you can do it cheaper, you can support more life up there, more experiments, research. Companies like Bigelow Aerospace who want to put human habitats in space for much cheaper than the space station. There's a lot of really cool things that we should all be excited about, not just as Americans, but as citizens of Earth, if you will. These things are going to go on to benefit everybody.
Excellent. Thank you. Comments for Jen? Really?
I actually think you did a really good job. No figure, no image was left
slide motif was great for the content. It was really captivating. The pictures all very much supported what you were talking about and accentuated the points you were trying to make without distracting from too much. It's great.
I was in a meeting with some very important people, taking notes, and I was actually looking through the Microsoft templates to find the right template for this. So I'm pounding away in the back, and I'm actually doing a search in like deep space and local templates. So that's a story.
Yeah, I agree. Great template. Alex?
I was gonna say, I really liked the presentation as well. I think that you did very well with your conclusion, and like driving the key point out. I think for me, personally though, like, I think we explained like the cost saving first and then like the how after. I think since I wasn't like too familiar with everything, I explained the how first, and then the cost savings after would have kept me more like engaged, because I just been thinking about like how, I guess how do I see the cost savings coming in, and then when you explain the chart, then I was like, oh, I kind of see how everything's going. And then another thing would maybe just to be like, since it's kind of technical and I wasn't like too familiar with it, just like maybe like to include a footer with something along with like the presentation, something like that. But overall, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, and, let me just add, like in terms of like what should be explained first and what order, one thought I had was, I really like this graph. It's simple, it's clear, and we just concentrate on him talking. And he cares about this, he's inspired, he's a rocket scientist, it seems, and we listen to him.
Truth be told, I did work at SpaceX, so I'm a little bit biased towards this, but it's...
And then, when I get to this is when, yeah, you're throwing me 90 million, then you go 50 to 75%, then the 50%, and the 30%, and that was too much, I thought. Like 30%, 50%, I wasn't able to follow it, and I was thinking back, could there be some sort of slide like this, where these seem like fairly simple numbers could be presented in a way that I understand. So, love the way you did this, and maybe this is the kind of thing Alex is talking about, in terms of not throwing something at us like this. Nick.
So if we could go to the visual with the whole rocket diagram. When I first saw this slide, when I first saw the slide, I said, this is where he's gonna lose me, right? Because I just didn't know what was going on. But I slowly realized, and as you went through a very high level in a clear manner, and it directly tied into what your conclusion was, which is reusable, or your topic, right, which is reusable rocket energy. And you went right in next in the preceding order, showing this is the part that breaks off, this is how it's being reused, and then it kind of clicked, I just kind of got it. So I thought that was a great transition from what could have been potentially a hang-up.
Yeah, you kept us engaged.
So I didn't understand a lot of the technical content. There was a lot of jargon in there, and but you know what? None of it mattered, because I liked your confidence. You're very confident with how you're delivering the presentation, and you're passionate, and I just wanted to listen to you. That's all.
Yeah. Vishali.
So I just wanted to add to this chart where, when I saw this chart, I felt the same way. I'm like, I have no idea what this chart is about. But then when you linked it with pictures on the next slide, that also helped in terms of what types of parts they can recover and refurbish. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, and I liked the cost per pound. $450 million just to refurbish.
If you actually divide the cost of the program by shuttle, it was $1.5 billion per shuttle. Just like think about that number for a second. $1.5 billion per shuttle.
Right, and also if the astronauts lose 10 pounds each, they save $70,000.
This would be the astronaut weight loss program.
Exactly. All right, Vishali?
I'm okay to, if it's not going to impact negatively.
You want to present?
Yeah.
Okay, do it.